So let's talk about non-covalent interaction. You know about covalent. Covalent bond is when atoms share electrons, but non-covalent interactions, they are not sharing electrons, but in other ways like electrostatic attraction or electromagnetic interaction. So non-covalent interactions are relatively weaker than covalent interactions, and they are reversible because they easily break down and they easily make up, or they can easily form and can easily be broken down. That's why they are reversible. Okay, hydrogen bonds. So the first non-covalent interaction we will deal with is hydrogen bond, special dipole interaction. So it's a dipole. Okay, sometimes you will see that non-covalent interactions is between molecules and covalent is between atoms. Atoms share electrons, but in non-covalent molecules attract. So sometimes it's called intermolecular forces. You could also see it's called intermolecular forces. So the first intermolecular force or first non-covalent interaction is hydrogen bonding. Hydrogen bonding forms from dipole interaction of two molecules. Okay, for example, here you can see it's two water molecules. This is dipole and this is dipole. Okay, here you have amine group with water molecule. This is dipole and this is dipole. Okay, and the origin comes from hydrogen and highly electronegative atoms like nitrogen, oxygen, and fluorine. So if these atoms approach hydrogen, then dipole forms. Very important for protein and DNA structure. Hydrogen bonding is very important for protein and DNA structure. You know, protein folding, the protein three-dimensional structure is stabilized by hydrogen bonding. Not only proteins, but in also when binding of an antigen to a specific antibody depends on weak interactions. Okay, also the binding of hormone to a neurotransmitter. Okay, it's also non-covalent interactions. Enzyme attaching or binding to a substrate is also non-covalent interactions. So non-covalent interactions are really very important in biochemistry and in biomolecular structures. Here you can see the DNA. This is base pair. Okay, GC, cytosine and guanine. Okay, guanine always connects with cytosine, and cytosine always connects with guanine. So the connection or the attraction is non-covalent interaction. These dashed lines indicate a non-covalent interaction, and the non-covalent interaction here is because of hydrogen bond. This red thing is oxygen. This white thing is hydrogen. This is a hydrogen bond. The white is always hydrogen, and this blue is a hydrogen bond. So this is how it forms. Okay, now the second non-covalent interaction is ionic. This always comes because of the different charge or opposite charge. If you have opposite charge, which are like cations and anions, then they form ionic bonding. Okay, ionic bonding. Like here you have, if you have sodium ion and in water molecule, there is attraction, there is interaction between the oxygen, which is slightly negative, and the sodium, which is positive. Okay, this one we will see why water molecules, why salt dissolves in water. We will see that one in moments. Also charged groups. Okay, charged groups like protonated amine, which is positive, and also carboxylate, deprotonated, negatively charged. These two groups will attract. This is ionic bond. Okay, it's ionic bond. Electrostatic interaction between two oppositely charged ions is called ionic bond. Okay, another very important non-covalent interaction is van der Waals interaction. Van der Waals. Van der is the guy who came up with these forces. Okay, so you have two types. You can be subdivided into two other groups or other forces. Dispersion forces, which is also called random forces, induced dipoles in non-polar molecules. These are all names are interchangeable. You can say anyone, all the same, all are van der Waals. Okay, so if you have dipole, induced dipole, this is attraction between one molecule which is dipole, which has a permanent dipole, and induced dipole. Now this one comes as a result of this one, as a result of the dipole. So if dipole, a polar molecule, approaches to a non-polar molecule, xenon is a noble gas, has no charge. Okay, so now when this polar molecule approaches to this non-polar molecule, the electron distribution, the electron density around this non-polar is disrupted. Okay, so this side will have less electron density because of these electrons, so this side becomes slightly positive. So that interaction is called dipole-induced dipole, and it's van der Waals forces. Big molecules like hexane and octane, they also have dispersion or induced dipole interactions. So variations will come on the electron density on each side, or for example, if this side the electron density is less, it will be slightly positive, so it can attract another side which has more electron density. So this is dispersion or induced dipole. So this one is induced and this one is induced attraction. Okay, van der Waals forces can also be dipole-dipole. For example, here the oxygen in this ethanol group, the oxygen in this carbonyl group is carrying a slight negative charge. Okay, because carbon is has less electronegative power than oxygen, so oxygen is carrying here slightly negative charge, and the hydrogen here is slightly positive, and this is because of the chlorine. The three chlorine atoms are highly electron withdrawing. They withdraw electrons from the carbon. Okay, and to balance, the carbon will also withdraw electron density from hydrogen, so hydrogen remains slightly positive. So this attraction comes. Okay, it's much weaker than hydrogen bonding, but it's dipole interaction, van der Waals forces interaction. Van der Waals forces are the weakest of all the non-covalent interactions. Okay, if we compare the strength, you can see the covalent bond is the highest. You need 400 kilojoules per mole to break that bond, which is very high energy. Ionic bond is the next, like 100 kilojoules per mole. Hydrogen bond, you need like 30 or 25 kilojoules per mole. The weakest one is the van der Waals forces of attraction. You only need like almost 4 kilojoules per mole to disrupt that van der Waals forces bond. Okay, we have now the last non-covalent interaction is hydrophobic interactions. Hydrophobic interactions or hydrophobic effect. Now hydrophobic interaction effects, hydro means water and phobic is hate. Water it's hating the water. So hydrophobic effect is to observe, comes as a result of what? Tendency of non-polar substances aggregate in aqueous solutions and exclude water molecules. In simple words, a hydrophobic interaction comes as a result of water and non-polar substance. If you have a non-polar substance like oil in water, now the oil will aggregate, will come together, okay, will cluster together itself, escaping the water molecule. Okay, like what happened here. Look at this diagram. The non-polar, that yellow thing is the non-polar part. They will aggregate. Okay, now the blue part is polar, that's why it's close to the water molecule. Now when the non-polar substance, they cluster together and aggregate, we call it micelle. Okay, micelle. In lipids, we sometimes call it amphipathic because they have a polar part which is small, and if it's polar, definitely it becomes hydrophilic, and we have a non-polar which is hydrophobic, the bigger part. Okay, so the lipids are like this. Okay, the lipids, they form the cell membrane, and the cell membrane is bilayer. Okay, this is one monolayer, this is one layer. Okay, so how this happens, the polar part will come together and also the non-polar part will also attract each other. So in general, hydrophobic effect comes as a result of the non-polar molecules or the non-polar substances with water, and this is very important in biochemistry, where you have many non-polar substances in water. Okay, now that one in the previous slide, it was the non-polar compound which give us the effect of hydrophobicity. Now this one will give us the effect of hydrophilic polar compounds. How do polar compounds behave with water? Water-soluble compounds are those which interactions between the solute and water are greater than those between solute molecules. Okay, now if you have sodium chloride, now the solute molecules are sodium and chlorine. Now the interaction between this solute with water is greater than the one between the solute molecules themselves. So you can see here, this is the solute molecule. It forms a shell, sulfation shell. Water molecules attract the solute. Okay, now in here we have the sodium. Okay, and this oxygen is negative, so there is an electrostatic attraction here. So this is how the solute molecules are separated. If you separate all solute molecules, that means you dissolve them. Khalas. Okay, so hydration shell or sulfation shell. So this is not only sodium chloride, but also in all compounds or all molecules which has hydrophilic functional groups, like ethanol, it has OH group. Okay, these OH groups can interact with water molecules. Okay, can interact with water molecules. Also glucose has carbonyl group. Okay, carbonyl group. This carbonyl group can also interact with the water molecule because of the difference in electron activity between the carbon and oxygen.